Eight Eyes. Control man and bird in a fight for the 8 jewels of power. And welcome to Nostalgia, a chronological exploration of every NES game released in North America. I'm Mike.
I'm Sean.
And I'm Joe.
Guys, welcome to 1990.
The year of my birth.
Yep, I'm almost born.
Yeah, we think we called out on the 1989 best of episode that we're gonna find out what game was closest to when we were born, and then that will be the game that you must play for the rest of your life.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's a good one. I mean, you
I can't
could
wait
roll
to
the
play
dice.
whatever shmup came out on my birthday for the rest of my life.
You're cursed.
Yeah, but we're not starting with a shmup for 1990. Who knows what 1990 will actually bring us? There are so many games. We're gonna play more games than ever before. I feel like I'm writing the commercial for the season rather than doing the episode. So I think we just get right into it and talk about Eight Eyes, because we have a different game than we've ever played before, perhaps because it's got that whole 2-player couch co-op thing going on.
Yeah,
Asymmetric.
Asymmetric couch co-op. I mean, it's sort of like Sonic and Tails, but worse. Not worse. Less emphasis on the tails, you know? Like he was almost like another Sonic, whereas in this, you're a bird.
I think he's a falcon.
It seems asymmetric in the sense, I mean, in a lot of senses, but one of the senses is definitely that, one character is a lot more robust in his, options than the other.
Yeah, it's like if you had to give, if you didn't just give your little brother an unplugged controller, but you wanted to minimize the damage he could do, you'd play Eight Eyes.
But I will say that I think that there's definitely a lot of potential for actual help to become from second player. You know, I don't think it's I'm trying to think of another example. You know, it does not exactly the same because it's not co-op, but Duck Hunt, we found out you can plug in the other controller and control the ducks. And it's like you barely even notice that there's a difference.
Yeah.
And this is okay, you can be a significant help as player 2.
Yeah, and I don't know about you guys, but whenever I play a game for Nostalgia, I try to go in as blind as possible. And when I first started playing Eight Eyes, I was like, oh, this is just another one of those side-scrolling action games. It felt like a Castlevania clone in some ways. Yeah. But instead of a whip, you have a sword. And then all of a sudden, I realized that, I was controlling the Falcon. It wasn't even obvious to me at first that I was the one doing it. It felt like a mistake. The Falcon's moving when I'm moving and stuff like that. And then I realized, oh, there's a whole, control scheme for a one player to be both the hero and the Falcon at the same time. It does work better with 2 players, no doubt, but they give you the option to I think that's better than having a computer controlled AI Falcon. If the game is built for 2 players to one be the hero, one be the Falcon, as a one-player experience, you can still try to bring in the reins as both of them.
Yeah, I read the manual before I booted it up, and it was describing sort of how they were going to go about this. And I was kind of intimidated by what they were saying. It's almost like a trope on this podcast, how often we talk about, there's only so many buttons on the controller, and it's, what they're trying to do, to how many mechanics you can fit onto this controller, kind of. And now you have to control 2 characters. And when they give you these 2 characters, you're kind of the controller is fighting with itself to control them all. And it's almost like, compared to the 2-player that I've seen, playing as both Orin and Cutris, the name of the bird, it's kind of like you got your arm tied behind your back or something.
Yeah, I think that there was. Well, let me ask you guys this. I don't know how much we want to get into the co-op right off the bat. I mean, it seems like it's a lot about co-op. So let me ask you guys: did you guys play with another person?
I did.
You did?
I did not.
I also did not, but I messed around in other ways with the co-op. But Mike, how was it?
It does work. It's probably like I still think it has that effect where like because I was doing it with my wife, so it's like you could try to convince her to play first, and then you tell her she's got to be the falcon. It's like, and the falcon actually can be very useful because it can attack certain enemies that the what'd you say his name was? Orin?
Yeah. Orin is the name on the screen.
Okay, yeah. So Orin can attack certain enemies, but the falcon can. So that can be very useful and make that player feel useful. And then there's also things like hidden in the wall that the falcon can only grab. And the things hidden in the wall are easy to do when it's just you. Like as a single player thing where it's like, all right, now I got to be the falcon for a second. Like that part's achievable. But the attacking part is more like you want to be you almost want to be like on the staircase below them and then take control of the falcon and start fighting. So that kind of stuff proved really useful, but I do think that the falcon still feels like a little brother.
See, I found that there were enemies that weren't even. I mean, I noticed the enemies that you could only attack with the falcon, but there were some that you could choose both. That I thought it was just more efficient to use the falcon based on their positioning, or like, oh, I'm going to jump down and I'm going to get stabbed immediately just because it's like one of those traps, sort of. But I can send the falcon down there and he sort of flies above. So like, I found it almost equal playing solo of times I wanted to use maybe not equal. I mean, maybe 60-40.
Now, are you playing, because you said that you found a way to do this. Were you playing the 2-player just with 2 controllers?
Yes.
Okay.
So because the thing that I think is a total miss on this game's part is like when you play 1 player, it still gives you that tool of the falcon. It clearly wants this to be a robust 1-player experience with both things, but it doesn't work the same. You can't move the falcon. I mean, unless I missed how to do it, you can't control where the falcon is going while you're quote unquote controlling the falcon. You just control when it attacks, and it just swoops from left to right of the screen.
That is sort of how it goes about. And I just didn't have the mental bandwidth. Like I was either like trying to just jump, and then I would accidentally send the falcon out, or I'd be trying to send the falcon out, and I'd just be crouching maniacally. I think maybe I should try this game again, playing it your way with my imaginary friend holding the second controller.
Yeah, I mean, it's still not perfect, but the way it works that way is that the falcon still just flies side to side if you just leave it alone.
Yeah.
But you can use the D-pad to move left, right, or up, down, which is something you can't even move up and down with the Falcon in 1 player. So, like, what I would use the Falcon a lot for would be, like, I'm on a top platform, there's an enemy below me that I don't want to jump into that pit with this enemy. I send the Falcon down to kill it. But it's still, I mean, obviously still not perfect when you're using 2 controllers. Like, I would still basically have to stop with my main character and start controlling the Falcon. But to that point, I almost feel like it could have been, a solution they could have done is, like, press select to switch to the Falcon. Yes, you're stuck standing still, which is why it's still better with 2 players, but at least you have control.
Yeah, I wonder why they didn't choose the select option, because I thought about that too, Joe. It is worth mentioning that they did include in the manual a note that you don't have complete freedom of movement in a 1-player game. So they weren't, like, trying to hide it. They knew their own limitations too, but they didn't tell you that on the back of the box. They waited until you bought the game to tell you that the Falcon's a little useless without a friend. So yeah, I think, like, the co-op thing makes it very unique, and I do think it's worth trying it out because that alone kind of gives it, like, a +1 factor if you're scoring this thing on a scale. Like, I would say, like, 1 point alone is just for the fact that, like, another player can jump in and actually do something that isn't just being, another Orin.
Yeah, and we give multiplayer games a lot of credit on this show, so it's definitely I should be trying this.
But as we're gonna get into, I'm not quite sure that 2-player asymmetrical co-op is enough to go through everything that this game offers. It's not enough of a cool factor, and I think no better way to start than to just walk through, like, how the game kind of lays itself out, and that is that it takes the I always call it the Mega Man style of approach, where you can select the stage you want to go to. There are 8 castles, each with an evil duke who controls one of the 8 jewels, not eyes, but the jewels are the eyes, the jewels are their eyes, I don't know. But that's the idea. You're collecting these jewels from these dukes. You gotta go to 8 different castles, and the order that you go to them, unlike Mega Man, kind of does matter. See, when you defeat a duke, you get a sword of a certain like color, and then that sword is only powerful on one specific duke in another castle. And if you don't go immediately to that duke, you'll lose that sword for whatever reason. You can't like have an inventory of your swords. You just get the next color and you drop, like, let's say you picked up the green, you just drop the green and grab the red, and now you have to figure out that. So there is an actual like optimal order level, which you could argue Mega Man does, but what I'm saying is that Mega Man gives you the freedom to say, I want this power up, and then you have it for the remainder of the game. 8 Eyes takes a different approach where it says, no, you're just going to get this Duke's sword, and then if you don't use it on the other correct Duke, get ready for a grind fest boss battle.
Yeah, like it's mostly like it's just a way to pad the length. Like you have to do trial and error. Like it's not that like there's anything fun with these swords. It's just it's basically a key item to make the next fight easier, right?
Right. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't have a like, this sword has a beam shoot out of it when you swing it. Like nothing like that.
To be honest, I didn't even realize that was what was happening. I just thought I kept getting a more powerful sword, and maybe I lucked out a couple times because maybe twice I got to these bosses and they were okay, but there was one boss I kept going back to and I just couldn't beat, and now I understand that maybe I just didn't have the right sword. Like every time I would go back to this level, this boss was just never any easier.
Yeah. Should we talk about the context behind these levels, like the story of the game?
The story of the game is great, Sean, so go for it.
Okay, so in our version of the game, you apparently play as somebody in the post-apocalypse. There was a nuclear war, and hundreds of years have passed, and now we've basically reset our technology and our, such as, what weaponry, and our interests, such as falconry, to something around the 1800s in some places and something around like the BC era in some other places. And all these dukes got these jewels that were formed at the core of a nuclear explosion. And if the wrong people get their hands on them, it could blow up the world again, I guess. But it's just funny because like there's this whole convolution for the game in the American version, but it's very simple in the original version where it just is the 1800s.
Right. And you know what's interesting too about like forget even the whole like plot difference of 1800s versus like distant future after a nuclear apocalypse. After the nuclear apocalypse, I'm supposed to believe that like all of these countries just exist exactly the same way that they always did, and with the same stereotypes too. Like all of these guys, the Spain guy is like a sword fencer. The Arabian guy just has like, the Lawrence of Arabia hat for no reason. It's like all these things that they didn't change anything about them. And then the Africa guy is just their token black person. It's like, this is all like crazy stuff to just suggest about the distant future when they could have just taken the easy route and kept the game the same way. But I guess maybe, in 1990, nothing was hotter than the atomic bomb.
Yeah. There was still the Soviets that we had to worry about and, the Cold War. But I guess the one thing that in the manual is like, okay, you've got this grandiose architecture and all this stuff that makes it look like the 1800s. But if you look into the manual, you get a gun, then it's really just like a Beretta. So that sells me on the post-apocalypse. That's the one piece of future.
That was the thing that I was like, oh, there's a gun in here. But until knowing the story, I was like, okay, yeah, whatever. It's just a gun. Like no big deal. It's like a fantasy world. Maybe it's like maybe then I was thinking like maybe it's like a Bloodborne type situation where it's like what is that like?
The silver bullets.
Yeah.
Now, the manual shows you the 8 dukes that you'll go up against, and next to each of them is a jewel that they represent. So you got one's like a black sphere, the other one's a diamond, so on and so forth. Sapphire. What I found was interesting, and I did not know this in my playthrough. I knew this in my research going afterwards, is that the sword that you get from defeating a certain duke, based on its color, right? So say you got the green sword, you would then go back to the manual, and if you look at the Italy boss, the Italy duke, he has the sapphire with or emerald, sorry, the green emerald. That green sword means that he is weak to that emerald. So the color of the gem corresponds to what the boss is weak to, and in no way do they lay that out in the manual. It's just like a hint. But wow, what an interesting way to just that's the key, right? Like somehow there's a decipher there.
Are they color coded in any way on screen in their sprites?
The sword is like in the top corner.
The sword that you have is, but is the duke.
That, to my knowledge, that's not the case.
Yeah, see, because I think that would be much more useful and cool. Where you can, I feel like I'd be more likely to pick up on that.
Yeah, but see, that allows them to sell the game on Blockbuster.
Yeah.
They need you to buy the manual with the game as well.
Yeah, but when back then? Oh, you mean like a separate manual that doesn't come with the game?
No. I'm saying, I don't think Blockbusters ever gave you the manual, did they?
Well, no, but Blockbuster, if there was anything really necessary, they would put a little text blurb on the back of the box that gave you some information for some games.
Right, and the one guy who figured this out.
That. I thought that you got manual. I mean, I'm talking at least PS1, PS2 days. I thought you got manuals, but I don't really remember.
Anyway, it's not even that cool of an inclusion because, like you said, Joe, it's not even obvious. It'd be cool if they almost put in hey, pay attention to the jewels that the bosses hold, as some kind of call out. But it's just not there. So I just question all this to go back to the very beginning of what we were talking about with the selecting the stages. I question why that even. It's not some elaborate puzzle. It's just something that you might find out as a happy accident later on, years later, I only found this out because of game FAQs. How many people are really going to put together that the color of the diamond in the manual corresponds with the color of the sword that they are weak to in the game?
Yeah, I don't know. It's almost like if they really wanted to make this player friendly, they would have just laid it out as a level 1, 2, 3, 4. And again, it's just kind of padding otherwise.
Yeah, I think it's like they were mixing two different things. It's like that you could they like it being separate and or whatever you call it, freedom of choice of which one you go to or whatever. I don't know why I'm fumbling what this concept is. You have the option, but then also they want this puzzle element, but without giving you that information. I feel like you could have both those things by saying, yeah, you got to figure this out. You got to figure out the color coding between the two of them. And then that gives you the incentive to play a different thing and say, okay, where should I go next? If you do it the other way, I feel like, it does feel like it's just artificial padding, just trial and error.
Because they already have a puddle. Not a puddle. They already have a puzzle built into the end of the game where you get all these jewels, and there are while you're playing the game, you get the hint scrolls that tell you how you're supposed to arrange them. It's that's already your puzzle. Don't add more.
That's if you're lucky enough to find all those
if
scrolls,
you find
too.
them. Yeah.
Right.
Because those scrolls say, it's not the most intricate riddle or anything like that. It literally just kind of lays out the put the black one next to the pink one or whatever. I'm not saying exactly what it says.
Yeah,
but
it's a Resident Evil puzzle.
You kind of need all of them to then figure out the start and end points. If you just have one of the scrolls, you might know which two are next to each other, but not even where they should be placed on the altar. Which is the end of the game too, which is kind of weird. It's just that once you beat all 8 dukes, you wind up at the House of Ruth, complete that stage, and then it just has, okay, now place the jewels on the altar and enter the ending screen. it feels kind of weird. It feels like you should put all 8 jewels down, and then that accidentally summons this thing that like everybody was nervous was going to happen, right?
Yeah, you should be the reason the world ends in this.
Or, the trick, like you were tricked into spawning the monster that is going to end the world, and now you must defeat it.
Boss. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
I feel like that's a Final Fantasy trope.
Game. Yeah. But I think like you actually have to beat the game 3 times.
Right. And that is true to get the true ending, but you won't notice anything different if you just beat it once for what it's worth. Remember that beating it once requires you to probably take the optimal route of knowing exactly which color sword represents which boss, and then also knowing all of the scrolls that hint at which jewel should be placed on which part of the altar. If you knew that, you would get to the ending that would reveal that the password to play the harder difficulty is the name of the developer twice, Taxan. And you play through the game a second time, you get all the way to the end, and it's still kind of, it says like, wow, like amazing job beating the harder difficulty, like not many people have made it this far, but hints that there might be something more, but then doesn't give the password for how to get to the third. Yeah. It's just crazy. I found this out online, which I imagine like was done through looking at code or something, or maybe it was given away in a magazine at one point, but the code is final stage. And that sounds like it's going to take you to some secret boss fight or, like the House of Ruth, but backwards now or something like that. But instead, it's just playing the whole game again. So you're the final stage.
Everything's faster.
But they're considering that a stage. The whole game is just a stage, right? Like now you're on the final stage of the game. This is stage 3. And I'm not sure how you find it. I'm guessing, like I said earlier, a magazine. But that is how you get the true ending, which is really, it starts off as congratulating you, pretending like as if like you're the first mortal who ever got there. But then kind of turns into like this push about how great a developer Taxan is for making one of the hardest games on the NES, which is their words. Like they're saying like we did this, like we made it a hard game. I don't think that's something to be proud about. Is that like, yeah, we made our game so hard, ha ha ha.
And I don't even know. Like I didn't even beat this game once because I was fumbling over the controller so much with this goddamn bird. So I don't even know. Maybe if like you and Joe like had a sleepover and spent 8 hours with this game, you guys could do it, but not in any world would I be able to.
All right, sleepover.
How Long to Beat puts it at 2 hours and 38 minutes, which I guess is like...
That's gotta be just the one, though.
Right. Even if it's not the one, I'm just saying like that's gotta be a great player because I spent more than 2 hours and 38 minutes with this and didn't even beat the game.
Yeah, I think that's if you know, first of all, well, the color coding trick, and you know like where to go, and you know where all the the scrolls are. Like if you're playing this for the first time and you're playing it blind, it's going to take a lot longer than that, in my opinion.
I think so. I used the words Castlevania clone at the top of the episode. I was obviously referring to just the first one because the first Castlevania and the second one are pretty different. And what I meant by that is really like almost everything that I could think of with the architecture, the enemies, the way you climb up the stairs really slowly and how you climb up the stairs, the sub-weapons, because that is like another thing where a lot of the sub-weapons are even the same kinds of sub-weapons, like the boomerang and stuff. However, 8 Eyes does let you carry multiple ones and change them on the fly, but the trade-off is that using these sub-weapons in Castlevania was you destroy things and get hearts, and then like 5 hearts equals 1 use of your boomerang, which sounds like a lot, but you're collecting hearts all the time. In 8 Eyes, I felt like I was depleted of my sub-weapon use very quickly.
Yeah, it felt like you really had to kind of save it and collect as many of those crosses that give you more sub-weapon energy, whatever you want to call it, they have to collect to use it. But yeah, it did feel a little more like I have to save this for when I need it.
And I agree that like between like, this is just going back to the similarities in general, that the sub-weapons are very similar. The way in which you accrue them is different, but and the walking cycle and the stairs. But I think the one thing, the most important part of this similarity is not similar at all, and it's between the whip and this sword. The whip feels good to lash. If that's the verb for whip, to whip. Whereas this dinky fencing sword, it's one of the least impactful weapons that we've played since that other medieval game with the was it Ghouls and Ghosts or one of those.
No.
not that one. Where the sword just sort of like wiggles in your wrist. If you remember that game from
Wizards and Warriors.
Wizards and Warriors, yes. Least impactful weapon.
I wouldn't have thought this was quite to that level of bad. I think that it was normally at first it was fine. I think the problem was just that every other enemy with a sword or some sort of handheld weapon had one that was just like 125% the length of yours.
Yeah.
So you could never get close.
The reach of a whip to the reach of this thing.
Right.
That's a pretty big difference.
Yeah. But so it felt like I had to just always time my hits right. Wait until I'd have to wait and watch the pattern of every enemy and see when is their moment that they're not attacking for a second. And that's when I can take a quick step in, stab, take a quick step out. It was not ideal.
Yeah, that's my biggest gripe with this game is that changes the pace of play and makes going through the levels, especially the longer they are, a chore because every enemy is kind of like this fencing match, which is something all of us called out as really cool in Zelda 2, The Adventures of Link. Here, it's not as cool because you have to go in, strike, run back, go back, strike, and yes, it's not every single enemy, but a good amount of the enemies, especially, as you get further on into the stages and cover some different ones, it requires I can't just go around this enemy. I can't just hop over them, or I can't just take a different route. I have to face off against this enemy, and I have to figure out how many hits do they even take before they'll be done. It really slows down the game in my opinion. And especially as one player, the Falcon's not, it's something you have to do from afar as well. So that doesn't help really with the pace of play either.
Yeah. I think with any criticism of the actual mechanics of this game, you just have to, by default, end with the qualifier, and also you have to worry about the goddamn bird. So
yeah. Well, that's why I think that what we're talking about with this, go in and jump out with half of the enemies, that's why I ended up switching to the Falcon so often. But you know what really doesn't help the pace of play is putting down one controller, picking up another controller, and then over and over again every time you want to switch. So it was not a great solution.
Yeah, depending on how you adjust to the different enemies, though, too. Sometimes it can feel like the sword is like a knife, like a kitchen knife, because you can get pretty close to these guys and still not make contact with them. I guess that's more of a hitbox issue. But it just made me feel really powerless to them at certain points in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I feel like it compensated for that a lot with, and I don't know if this is a negative or a positive. I think in some cases it's a negative, some it's a positive, but you just have so much health that you can kind of suffer through this sword and just tank hits for a while until you realize oh shit, now I don't have any health left for this level. But you have a lot, you can take a lot of hits.
Yeah, I think that's necessary with just how encumbering the actual combat is in this game.
And it makes me wonder if they changed your HP bar as an afterthought when they realized wow, this is not ideal combat.
Something about the way this Orin guy walks too, and his sprite design, it looks like it's a skeleton with hair and a red cloak around him. His bones are very pronounced when he walks, and it's unsettling to me. But Sean, you know the plot, so maybe that was explained as part of the fallout.
Yeah, he's a ghoul. I would imagine that he's just got very pronounced bones now.
Well, speaking of skeletons, Sean, since you're the story expert here, do you know why after every level you are served your next power-up by a skeleton on a platter at a table?
It is so weird.
After your cup of tea.
I love it. I love that somewhere off camera with each of these dukes, he's just all all right, I give up. Let's have a quick talk about how we're going to get the rest of these jewels. Yes, my ghoul companion servant will come and serve us tea. And I don't know what it's about. I don't know what it's about. I love it. Between the music and the weirdness of these post-boss scenes, it really does set a weird vibe, but I'm here for it.
And that's something that is not explained by it being the 1800s.
No.
People were more polite to each other back then. They'd be like, I concede defeat, let's have a cup of tea.
In life and in undeath.
Yeah.
It is enjoyable, though, that the skeleton, after he serves the tea and the sword, he walks away, but it looks like to me, at least, he's laughing about it. Like, he finds the whole situation funny as well. His mouth just like chatters pretty fast, and I associate that with laughing, because otherwise he's like saying something under his breath to us, and no skeleton servant would be rude.
No,
right?
Not in this world.
He's laughing with us.
A couple things it does right on the Castlevania side of clones is that there aren't any like pits, at least that I saw, like no like infinite pits, or the platforming in the game was a little more varied than Castlevania 1 was. I guess I'm talking more about how you control. The jumps weren't like super stiff, and the knockback wasn't like ridiculous, if any. Actually, I can't remember now if there was knockback.
The jump, I remember realizing that I really liked the arc of the jump, but I don't know if that was more or less sort of propped up than in Castlevania.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like a good jump on probably on the curve of NES jumps so far, but there is still it's not up there with like the perfect jumps. Like there's still feels like a little bit of a delay or like a cooldown to your jump or something that like makes it feel ever so slightly sticky.
I hear that.
As good of a game as Castlevania is, that jump can get really annoying at times, where you actually have to be at the edge of the platform in order to successfully make the jump between the pits. So between this having a better jump and not having any pits, I'd say that is a step in the right direction.
Put a check mark next to improved jump.
And what about the puzzle element to these stages? There's these switches that need to be flipped or turned on by the falcon, and they don't really evolve at all. It's just turn them on and the doors will open. Otherwise, you can't proceed.
Yeah, I don't think it ever was. I feel like it's like one of those things that like doesn't add or really subtract much for me. It just felt like a little bit of like a maybe artificial way to incorporate the falcon again.
Right, because otherwise it's like you have to go from either left to right or up to down to navigate through these stages. You can't like cheat your way through the door at the end. So what's the point of like locking it other than to say like, well, now you have to go back around and look for that switch.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess like it did have like a timer on it too. So like there were some times where I think I could hit the switch myself and then run over there, and then there were other times where it's like it doesn't. I think that maybe the idea was like, oh, you have to send the falcon out so you can get to the door in time, but it never gets hard to get to the door in time because you can just stand at the door while you're sending the falcon.
Yeah, I agree.
And I guess you just have to defend yourself. I don't know.
It's give the bird something to do.
Yeah.
Did they give the bird enough to do? Forget about the whole fact that another player can be the bird. Just the fact that the bird can mostly just either attack or pick up scrolls or flip switches. Is that enough for like a falcon's job?
I don't know. I guess I would like to see power-ups or something for the bird. Just, I know it's ridiculous that sounds, just to make it feel like it's as robust as player one. But like otherwise, yeah, that's everything player one does. It's just player one has more tools to do it.
Yeah, I guess I would have liked them to play more with the falcon only parts. Like if you really wanted to embrace both 2-player and as a single player thing, if there were certain areas in levels that only the falcon would be useful in, and it was kind of like whether you're playing as one player or two players, this is the section where you really have to like focus in on your, your falcon skills and your movement and puzzle solving or something. It would have seemed a little more useful. They don't have to go as far as like locking off sections where you're just the falcon or something like that, or that, crazy stuff like now the falcon can pick up Orin and fly around with him.
Falcon can't do that, Mike.
Well, that's true. You know what? I actually just had like a slight change of heart right now while thinking about it. Like, as far as does the falcon need more? I think that and again, I haven't played a 2-player, so it's hard. Like, hard to really judge that. But I think that what the balance is that the falcon can fly and has that mobility, but can't use power-ups or projectiles. Whereas the guy, I'm not going to use their names, I don't remember them, Orin, whatever. The guy doesn't have the same mobility, but can use a couple projectile weapons and has a little bit more of an arsenal. So like that, I like that conceptually.
Yeah, otherwise just get another guy, like we were talking in the beginning.
Yeah, or just be the falcon, because you can do everything the guy can do and fly.
But my thing is almost on the opposite. Like, my criticism here for the one-player experience, the fact that both Orin and Cuttress have their own health gauge. Like, for me, as a single player, I don't want to have to watch 2 different health gauges, in addition to how much power I've got left in my magic item or whatever. And especially because they're kind of like shown in reverse, like it goes down to the left instead of down to the right. It was kind of hard for me to read, but I think in the single player experience, because you aren't in direct control of this goddamn bird, you shouldn't have to worry about the bird dying. Maybe that's me thinking the game should be too easy, but I also just there's too much going on.
That's another thing that I think if I heard you say that before I had played it, I would totally agree. But again, having played it totally differently, where I'm stopping, picking up another controller, then using the bird, I didn't mind having the 2 health bars, because like actually I would sometimes use that to my advantage, where it's like, okay, Orin is weak right now, I'm going to send in Cuttress instead. But I don't think that would work the same way.
Yeah, I specifically meant the designed one-player experience. I think it does serve
I guess
a purpose.
That's true. I guess I keep forgetting that I did not play the intended one-player.
And I just, while we're talking about like the individual stages, I said architecture, but I really meant like the graphics of the game and the way it all looks is stylized like Castlevania.
Yes.
Kudos to the people in the manual, though, for the names of some of these enemies. Sometimes we do highlight funny names. I can't remember which games they are, but this one really leaned into that. It knows that it's being funny. For instance, the skeletons are named Yoga because they're sitting cross-legged in their picture, and for no other reason at all. So I have to think that like whatever the explanation was for the Japanese version of why the skeletons exist in the 1800s, this was the photo that was provided to them, and they had to include it in their manual. They couldn't just hire another person to draw the enemies again. So they used those, and they said, all right, well, this guy's sitting cross-legged, so he's Yoga. And this guy has a scimitar, so he's Scimitar Sam. This guy is just a normal person, so we'll call him Ugly.
I particularly liked Crossboy and Sir Slice.
I just like the idea that, like, in the post-apocalypse, there will be a guy walking around in, like, a cloak with a scimitar. He called himself Scimitar Sam.
It's also, it's a weird scale of, like, who gets a name. Like, Scimitar Sam gets a name because of his scimitar, or because his name was Sam and then he picked up the scimitar?
I think his name was Sam. And,
no, but think about this, okay? Mace, what was his name? He carries a mace, but he doesn't get a name. He's not Mace Windu.
I want to say that, okay, if he's Scimitar Sam, I think that if his name wasn't Sam beforehand, they just call him Scimitar. You know, that sounds cooler. Like Scimitar Sam, It sounds like someone that doesn't really respect you gave you that name.
Well, poor
What are you
Mace
saying about
was born
Sam
without
Emmanuel Smith?
That's what we'll be calling him now. No longer Sam the Manual. We'll be calling him Scimitar Sam.
Well, Sam also gave himself that name. Or was it Mike?
I think I gave it to him. It's a new season, and we're trying to bring even more information to the people. Patron of the show and all-around friendly, cool dude Stephen Greenwell reached out to me on our Discord and said he'd be happy to provide some information to the players. So I'm not going to refuse help. I asked, what do you got? And I was, not sure what I would get, but what I got was an awesome amount of content, and I just want to highlight some things. There's no way this is like its own show if I said everything in here. But I thought one thing that was interesting that we don't usually look at is like sales figures and like advertisements from the time. And he managed to find that the game was originally priced $45 when it released. And that, that's not like the standard NES game price. NES game prices were just kind of priced whatever they like deemed the value of. So like some games are 45, some games are 40, some games are 30. The $30 game is notably Anticipation, which was like a low involved game. So I can understand like they're selling 8 Eyes as something like, this is a big adventure game. And if anybody remembers Final Fantasy 3, that was like $80 when it released. And the whole idea was not that like it contained any more like it wasn't more expensive to make or anything. They just said like, yeah, it's a bigger adventure, so we're going to charge more for these games.
Yeah, I kind of remember, like games on the PS1, like when they were kind of budget titles, they'd be $20 instead of the $50.
Right. And so it was $45 when it first came out, but then immediately, like in later this year, it goes down to $20. And then by December of 1990, there's even a like $5 off coupon specifically for 8 Eyes. Like it's not for every game. It's for like Air Fortress 720, Mad Max, Infiltrator, and 8 Eyes. And the funny thing about the 8 Eyes price is that it was already down to 20. It's not like it went back up to 45. So now this game is $15 in just 12 months. And for what it's worth, it's now $10.70 for just the cart on like eBay. So you still didn't make out with too good of a deal, inflation adjusted, when you think about $15 versus now $10.
Wow. So is this one of those like situations where they were just expecting it to be like, oh, this is going to be like a mega hit, and then it just didn't even come close, and they're like, we gotta get rid of these?
Yeah, I mean, it just sounds like they over-ordered. Everybody over-ordered this game, and they need to clear that stock.
Well, you know what makes this game so popular?
What's that?
Its position in your emulators. It's 8 Eyes with the number 8. It's always going to be like the first game in your files. So
what about 10-yard fight?
8 is smaller than 10, Joe. So
yeah, but the 1 doesn't.
Yeah,
just
but
go
the
by
0 would
digit?
count too. No,
it's not a 0 8 Eyes. It would be after. If we're gonna start arguing about emulator file positioning, it would be after 10.
You guys talk amongst yourselves. I'm going to check my no intro set right now.
He can't be called out like that.
Yeah, so 8 Eyes is before a 10-yard fight. The only thing, because the way things work is that 10 is a larger number than 8, so the 1 doesn't like prerequisite.
I don't appreciate your tone, Mike.
I'm just saying, the one game though that does come before all of them, and we've played it. What would come before 8 Eyes? And knowing that 8 Eyes comes before 10-yard fight. No guesses. Great. The answer is 3D World Runner, because it is 3-D and the 3 is lower than 8. So that's how numbers continue to work.
All right. Well, this file system is not normal.
Yes, this is not how alphabetically, no, it's not alphabetic, but if you
Let's
put
go
something
digit by
alphabetically,
digit.
when you get to the number part, you usually just start with the first digit, I thought.
I mean, I'm not gonna. We don't have to do it on the show, but I challenge you guys to just do it. Just do it on with your own.
I
files.
believe you that's where it's coming up.
No, but I'm saying it's not specific to my emulator. I'm saying rename any of your files on your desktop in 8 or 10, and it's gonna sort the 8 first.
I think that we need to have another podcast about this.
we just count numbers. The first episode will be number 1, and we'll just say 1, and then we'll move on and record the second episode.
I think we should cut it together so it's blocks of 1,000 at the very least.
I'm telling you, I swear in the past I've had that exact problem where I number things through 15, and all the ones with 1 start going up above everything else, and then I gotta renumber them so it'll go correct.
You're not crazy. That's the way it usually works. I did just check, and Mike is right, but I don't know how.
They must have changed it.
They changed
Everyone got together behind me and your back.
It's one of those Mandela effect things. You guys came from the universe where they sorted by the first digit.
Mike just edited the wiki of how to sort things, and then everybody saw that. We're like, oh shit, we got this wrong. We got to update it real fast.
Sorry, this isn't making it into the show anyway. So
yeah, that's right.
I got Tim Apple on the phone and told him to fix this. Speaking of fixing things, we did fix the Essential Games list last episode, and it is a little scary to know that when we record the Essential Games list for 8 Eyes or any game for 1990, it's very far away from the next time you'll get a chance to do any revising. So, do you guys feel any pressure about your Essential Games list votes for this episode, knowing that you will have 2 whole years before you can revisit your votes?
I've felt pressure about my Essential Games vote list ever since I voted Excite Bike on in episode 3 or whatever it was, and then had to wait 2 months to take it off. So yeah, for the 3-year wait is going to be tough if I decided something is different than I thought in the first place.
Look, Mike, I live my life a quarter mile at a time. So
well said,
I'm
Sean.
never thinking about what I'm going to put on the Essential Games list before I play the game. And I like my emotions to speak for me, and I'm not trying to strategize the Essential Games list like you guys.
Understood. With that note, it feels like there's no better time to talk about 8 Eyes and the Essential Games list at the same time than in a little segment we call the Essential Games list. Sean, it's a new season, but it's still 2022 on the calendars, and you still get to vote first because of that rule I made in January of this year. Your power's almost over, but you still get to go first. So what's
I
your
wouldn't
vote?
call it power, it's
it's all theoretical power. Technically, you could say something that makes one of us reconsider, right?
True. I wasn't expecting this. I thought that it went by the year of the show, but it does make sense. You'd be whoever's next would then get 200 and something games for this. So I get it.
I think Sam's next.
We've been playing this game, and I think it's been skewing negative. But it is just such a weird game. Between its weird quirks, and we were pretty positive on some things that we didn't talk a lot about. This game has a lot of good music in it, and I think the art in it is pretty good. But beyond that, I just was befuddled most of the time, so I'm gonna say it's not essential.
Joe?
Yeah, I really had a good time with it too. I mean, I think that there's a lot of cool ideas in it. I think that the 2-player probably is really fun. I would like to play it. I love the idea, the concept of the Falcon thing. It just, in 1-player especially, they need to work out a lot of kinks. It's weird to me that they would give you the same tools in 1-player, but they let them work totally differently. I feel like for the way I was playing it, which obviously was kind of a janky way to play it, it felt really important to use both of those elements of gameplay, the man and the bird. But in 1-player, it doesn't really give you enough freedom to actually use both of those. It doesn't actually seem reasonable to ever really use the bird. And beyond that, I think that there's just there's a lot of quality of life and like other gameplay decisions that like need to be improved before I would be able to put this as essential. But I will say I think that this is a play it. I think you should check this one out. And as weird as it sounds, if you can't play with a second player, I would recommend playing with a second controller and just putting one down and picking the other up when you need to change. Like, get yourself in a safe spot. It's definitely not the intended way. It's definitely not ideal, but I still had fun time with it. But no, not essential.
Almost everything I like about this game comes down to the cool It Takes Two style couch co-op. But even after playing that, not It Takes Two, but this game. Even after playing that, Joe, I think you're right that it's probably an easier and more interesting experience with a friend. But I was trying to say earlier that like the experience for the friend isn't a complete game. Like, Orin does so much more than the Falcon. So the Falcon does kind of feel like the little brother role. And you're not doing, you're not like all of a sudden you're doing badass combos and you're like, no, let me take this one. Like, you're the Falcon. There's only so much you can do. So the 2-player, whether it's by yourself or with a friend, doesn't fix the pacing issues I was talking about in regards to combat, platforming, progression with those switches over the doors, figuring out what the correct order is also a pacing issue because you more than likely won't pick the right sword for the right person just through guesswork. Forcing the person to beat the game 3 times, even though I don't think anybody should have to do that. It wasn't okay in Ghosts and Goblins, and although it was kind of funny because that game was really, really hard, it's not okay here either because they do it 3 times and they don't even make it obvious how to do the 3rd time. So for all those reasons, I'm out on this one. I don't think I would put it in my play it though either. I think there was a lot going on in this game, and sometimes that can work in its favor. But I think what this game was trying to do, it didn't even pull off there.
I agree. I don't think it's a play it either.
Cool.
It just has a couple bright spots.
And if you want to see more bright spots on the NES, continue to join us on this chronological journey through 1990. Who knows how many games we're playing in 1990? It's like 100-something. 190 maybe even, which is crazy because we just played 90 games just for 1989. Next week, we're going to play Bases Loaded 2, the 2nd season. And if you're joining us on our Patreon, patreon.com/nostalgia, we have our Nostalgia Bites episodes where we'll be doing Kid Dracula for the month of December because nothing says Christmas like Kid Dracula. And we're also doing, for all patrons, no matter what level you subscribe at, there's only 2 levels, by the way. I wasn't going to pretend like there's some secret $1,000 a month level. Just on the 2 levels, either $1 or $5, everybody gets access to our special Game Boy launch games episode. We're not doing a chronological Game Boy exploration. We're not about to go review every Game Boy game. It's just that it feels kind of weird to talk about Nintendo's 1989 and not cover their biggest release of the year, which is an entire new system with some very exclusive games.
Fun.